My landlord ignored every repair request for 2 years. Broken heat, leaking ceiling, mold growing in the bathroom corner that looked like it was developing its own ecosystem. I documented everything. I paid rent on time every single month. And when I finally got my real estate license and bought his entire building at auction, he found out when the eviction notice came from me. My name is Marcus Webb, I'm 31 years old, and this is the story of how the worst landlord in Philadelphia accidentally taught me more about real estate investing than any course ever could. It started in November 2021. I just moved to Philly from Boston after a bad breakup, needed a fresh start. New job as a junior data analyst, new city, new life. I found a studio apartment in Fishtown for $1,200 a month. Not perfect, but affordable. My landlord was a guy named Dennis Karpinski, mid-50s, drove a Mercedes he clearly couldn't afford based on the condition of his properties. The apartment seemed fine during the viewing. A little dated, sure, but clean enough. Dennis gave me his whole spiel about being a hands-on landlord, how he took pride in his buildings, how tenants were like family to him. I signed the lease the same day. The problem started 2 weeks after I moved in. First, it was the radiator. November in Philadelphia gets cold, and my radiator made this grinding, screaming sound like it was dying, then stopped producing heat altogether. I texted Dennis at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday. Hey Dennis, radiator in Unit 3B stopped working. Getting pretty cold in here. Can you send someone to look at it? 3 days later. We'll get to it. A week passed. Nothing. The temperature in my apartment hovered around 50 degrees. I was sleeping in 2 hoodies and thermal pants. I texted again. Dennis, still no heat. It's been over a week. This is urgent. Can't get a guy till next month. Use a space heater. So I bought a space heater. $75 at Target, which came out of my already tight budget. The radiator didn't get fixed until January, and only because I called the city housing inspector and filed a complaint. Dennis showed up personally, furious, fixed it in 20 minutes, and told me I was making a big deal out of nothing. That should have been my first clue about who I was dealing with. February, the kitchen sink started leaking. Not a little drip, a full-on puddle forming under the cabinet that was warping the particle board. I texted Dennis with photos. Kitchen sink leaking badly. Water damage to cabinet. Need this fixed ASAP. His response, 4 days later. Put a bucket under it. I put a bucket under it. For 3 months. The cabinet rotted through. When I mentioned the damage, Dennis told me I'd caused it by not reporting the leak sooner, and threatened to keep my security deposit. March brought the ceiling leak. My upstairs neighbor's bathroom had a slow leak that created a brown water stain on my ceiling that grew bigger every week. I documented it with photos, timestamps, measured the growth, sent detailed emails to Dennis with everything an attorney would need. Nothing. The stain grew from the size of a dinner plate to half the ceiling. I started sleeping on the couch because I was genuinely worried the ceiling would collapse on me. April, I found mold. Black mold, growing in the corner of my bathroom near the ceiling, spreading down the wall. I knew enough to know that was a health hazard. I sent Dennis photos, links to articles about black mold exposure, a polite but firm request for immediate remediation. It's just mildew. Spray some bleach on it. I sprayed bleach on it. The mold came back within a week. By summer 2022, I'd filed 18 repair requests. Dennis had addressed 0 of them. But here's the thing, I never missed rent. Not once. $1,200, first of every month, like clockwork. I even paid through Zelle so there was a digital trail. Because I was learning something about Dennis. He was a slumlord, yes, but he was also desperate. His Mercedes had a dent in the side that never got fixed. He wore the same 3 shirts in rotation. And he owned 4 buildings in Fishtown, all in similar states of disrepair. I started researching. Public records are beautiful things in Philadelphia. I found out Dennis had bought these buildings in 2008, right before the financial crisis, probably overpaid. He'd been juggling mortgages and declining property values ever since. He was hemorrhaging money, cutting every corner he could, letting his buildings fall apart because he couldn't afford to maintain them. And I realized something. I could learn from this. I started studying for my real estate license in my spare time. I read everything I could about property law, landlord-tenant regulations, investment strategies, foreclosure auctions. I took an online course at night after work. In September 2022, I passed my exam. I was now a licensed real estate agent in Pennsylvania. Dennis had no idea. I kept paying rent. Kept documenting every ignored repair request, every building code violation, every health hazard. I had a binder 2 inches thick. But I also started watching the foreclosure listings. In December 2022, I saw it. Dennis's 4 buildings were going to sheriff's sale. He'd fallen behind on his mortgage payments. The auction was scheduled for February 14, 2023. Valentine's Day. I started saving every penny. I talked to a mortgage broker about investment property loans. I ran the numbers 100 times. Could I actually do this? Could I buy the building I was living in, the building Dennis refused to maintain, out from under him? The answer was yes. Barely, but yes. I spent January preparing. I drove by all 4 buildings, took notes on their condition, estimated repair costs. I talked to contractors about bulk pricing if I renovated multiple units. I created a business plan. I was terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. The auction was at 10 a.m. on February 14th. I took the day off work, told them I had a doctor's appointment. I showed up at the Philadelphia City Hall in my best suit, hands shaking, cashier's check in my pocket for the down payment. Dennis wasn't there. Why would he be? He'd probably given up, let his properties go, figured he'd just walk away from the debt. The bidding started at $180,000 for the first building, the one I lived in. 2 other bidders. I stayed calm, raised my paddle, kept my face neutral like I'd practiced. The other bidders dropped out at $210,000. Going once, going twice, sold to bidder 47. I'd just bought my building for $210,000. 3 other investors bought Dennis's other buildings. Everything he owned was gone in under an hour. I walked out of that courthouse feeling like I'd just won the lottery and jumped off a cliff simultaneously. 2 weeks later, after the sale was finalized and I officially owned the building, I sent Dennis an email from my new property management company email address. Subject: Notice to vacate building ownership transfer. Dear Dennis, this letter serves as official notice that the property located at 742 East Columbia Avenue has been sold at sheriff's sale. I am the new owner. As per Pennsylvania landlord-tenant law, you have 30 days to transfer all tenant security deposits and provide a full accounting. Additionally, as the new owner, I'll be conducting immediate repairs to bring all units up to code, including but not limited to heating system replacement, plumbing repairs, mold remediation, and ceiling repair in Unit 3B. I look forward to working with you on a smooth transition. Best regards, Marcus Webb. Licensed real estate agent. Web property management. I didn't hear back for 3 days. Then my phone rang from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. This is Dennis Karpinski. I don't know what kind of scam you're trying to pull, but you can't just buy my building. I'm calling my lawyer. You'll be hearing from me. I saved the voicemail. Then I sent him the sheriff's sale documentation, the deed transfer, and copies of all 18 ignored repair requests from the past 2 years. He called back an hour later. No voicemail this time, just silence when I picked up then. You're the tenant from 3B. I was your tenant, I corrected. Now I'm your former landlord. And I have some repairs to show you how they should be done. He hung up. The real satisfaction came 3 weeks later, when I started renovations. I hired contractors to fix everything Dennis had ignored. New heating system, fixed all the plumbing, professional mold remediation, repainted, refinished floors. I did it right. My other tenants, the ones who'd been suffering under Dennis just like I had, were thrilled. I honored their leases at their current rates, promised them a landlord who actually responded to repair requests, and gave them my personal cell phone number for emergencies. One of them, Mrs. Chin from 2A, brought me homemade dumplings and cried. I've lived here 6 years, she said. You fixed my heat in 2 days. Dennis never fixed it once. That moment, right there, that was better than any revenge. The first month of ownership was chaos in the best possible way. I was learning how to be a landlord while simultaneously holding down my full-time data analyst job and managing a complete building renovation. I'd wake up at 6 a.m., check in with contractors, go to work, spend my lunch break on the phone with suppliers, come home and do walkthroughs until 9 p.m. My girlfriend Sarah thought I'd lost my mind. We'd been dating for 8 months, and she'd watched me transform from a guy who complained about his landlord to a guy who owned a 4-unit building and was renovating it himself. "You bought a whole building," she said one night, watching me review contractor bids at her kitchen table. "Like, you know that's insane, right?" "Insane would have been staying there and continuing to freeze while my ceiling grew mold," I said. "This is just aggressive problem solving. You're 26 years old, Marcus. Most people our age are figuring out their careers. You're a landlord." 31, I corrected. "And I'm still figuring out my career. This is just a side thing." She laughed. "A side thing? You bought a building." But she wasn't wrong about it being crazy. I was stretched thin financially, learning on the fly, making mistakes. I bought the wrong size pipe fittings for the bathroom renovation in Unit 1A and had to return them twice. I hired a contractor who did shoddy work on the first job and had to fire him and redo everything. I stayed up until 2 a.m. reading Pennsylvania landlord-tenant law because I was terrified of screwing something up. But I was also having the time of my life. The building had good bones. Dennis had just neglected it into oblivion. With actual maintenance and care, it was a solid investment. I refinished the hardwood floors myself on weekends, stripping decades of grime and bad varnish jobs. I repainted every unit in neutral colors that made them look modern and clean. I replaced all the fixtures, upgraded to energy-efficient appliances, installed new windows. The unit I'd been living in, 3B, I saved for last. It felt symbolic somehow. I tore out the rotted kitchen cabinet Dennis had told me to ignore, replaced the whole sink and counter. I had the black mold professionally remediated, then repainted the entire bathroom. I fixed the ceiling where my upstairs neighbor's leak had created that massive brown stain. When it was done, it looked like a completely different apartment. Light, clean, modern. Nothing like the cold, moldy box I'd suffered in for over a year. Mrs. Chin from 2A told all her friends about the new building management. I started getting inquiries from potential tenants before I'd even listed the vacant units. Word of mouth in Philly neighborhoods travels fast, especially when it's about a landlord who actually fixes things. I rented 3B to a young couple, teachers, for $1,300 a month. $50 less than market rate because they seem nice and I like the idea of teachers living in my building. They moved in March 1st and sent me a text 2 days later with a photo of them cooking in their new kitchen. "Thank you for caring about this place." Meanwhile, Dennis was unraveling. I heard through the real estate community that he was trying to blame the foreclosure on everyone but himself. The bank, the market, the tenants who destroyed his properties. Never mind that he'd been collecting rent for years while refusing to do basic maintenance. He tried to keep the security deposits from all his former tenants. I had to threaten legal action to get him to transfer them. He finally sent a check 3 days before the deadline, and it bounced. I had to file a complaint with the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office. The AG's office loved my documentation. 2 years of ignored repair requests, photos of code violations, records of every on-time rent payment. They opened an investigation into Dennis's business practices across all his former properties. I wasn't trying to destroy the guy. I just wanted what was legally required, the security deposits transferred properly so I could return them to my tenants, or apply them correctly. But Dennis made everything difficult. In April, one of the other investors who'd bought Dennis's buildings at auction called me. His name was James, he was in his 50s, had been investing in Philly real estate for 20 years. "You're the kid who bought 742 Columbia, right?" he asked. "That's me. I bought the building next door. Heard you're doing renovations. Want to grab coffee and talk shop?" I met James at a cafe in Fishtown. He showed up in work boots and a flannel shirt, completely unpretentious. We talked for 2 hours about contracting, tenant screening, property management software, tax strategies. He'd been where I was, just 25 years earlier. Dennis was a cautionary tale, James said. Bought at the wrong time, overleveraged, never learned proper management. Buildings like these, they'll make you money if you take care of them. But you gotta put the work in. I'm learning that, I said. You did something smart, buying the building you were living in. You knew exactly what was wrong with it. Most investors buy blind and get surprised. You eliminated that risk. He introduced me to his contractor network, gave me the number of his property insurance guy, explained his tenant screening process. By the end of that coffee meeting, I had a mentor. Over the next few months, James taught me more about real estate investing than any course could have. He showed me how to read a market, how to spot good deals, how to manage cash flow. He explained the difference between appreciation and cash flow investing, showed me his spreadsheets, walked me through his first 10 deals. The thing nobody tells you, he said one afternoon while we were reviewing my building's financials, is that real estate success isn't about one big score. It's about doing the boring stuff consistently. Good tenants, proper maintenance, steady cash flow. That's how you build wealth. My building was cash flowing by May. After mortgage, insurance, taxes, and setting aside reserves for maintenance, I was clearing about $800 a month. Not life-changing money, but solid. And the building was appreciating as the neighborhood improved. I started looking at my next deal. James was buying a duplex in Kensington and offered to let me partner with him, teach me the process. I put in 20% of the purchase price, he handled the management, and we split the profits. By summer 2023, I owned one building solo and had a partnership stake in another. I was still working my data analyst job full-time, but real estate was becoming more than a side thing. It was becoming a path. Sarah and I had the conversation in June. She'd been patient, supportive, but also realistic. "Where is this going?" she asked. "Us, I mean. Not the real estate." We were sitting on my newly renovated building's front steps, watching the neighborhood evening unfold. Kids playing in the street, couples walking dogs, the city alive around us. "I don't know," I admitted. "I'm so focused on building this, I haven't thought past next month." "That's what I figured." She wasn't angry, just honest. "You're building something, Marcus. I can see that. But I don't think I'm part of what you're building." We broke up that night. It was sad but not devastating. She was right. I was obsessed with real estate, with proving I could do this, with building something that was mine. There wasn't room for a relationship that required attention I didn't have to give. I threw myself deeper into the work. James and I bought another property together. I started attending real estate investor meetups, networking, learning from people who'd been doing this for decades. I read every book on real estate I could find. In August, I got a letter from the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office. They'd concluded their investigation into Dennis Karpinski's business practices. He'd been fined $15,000 for security deposit violations, failure to maintain habitable conditions, and deceptive business practices. He was also prohibited from being a landlord in Pennsylvania for 5 years. I didn't feel triumphant reading that letter. I just felt tired. Dennis had been a terrible landlord, yes, but he was also a cautionary tale about what happens when you're in over your head and refuse to admit it. The real victory wasn't his downfall. It was Mrs. Chen's dumplings, and the teachers in 3B sending me photos of their happy home, and the steady deposit that hit my account every month from rent. It was building something good from something that had been broken. September marked 1 year since I'd started studying for my real estate license. I'd gone from freezing tenant to building owner to investor. My portfolio was worth close to $400,000 between my solo building and the partnership properties. My cash flow was covering my living expenses plus giving me capital to invest in the next deal. I quit my data analyst job in October. It was terrifying and exhilarating. James offered me a job working with his investment company part-time while I built my own portfolio. I took it. By November, I was a full-time real estate investor at 31 years old. I had 3 buildings in my portfolio, a mentor who'd become a friend, and a business that was growing steadily. And Dennis? I heard through the real estate gossip network that he'd moved to New Jersey, was working in sales somewhere, told everyone who'd listen about how he'd been screwed by the system. I didn't contradict him. I was too busy building. The phone call came in December, almost exactly 2 years after I'd first moved into Dennis's building. Unknown number, but I was expecting a contractor call back, so I answered. Marcus Webb? A woman's voice, professional, slightly hesitant. That's me. My name is Jennifer Karpinski. I'm Dennis Karpinski's daughter. I got your number from the Real Estate Licensing Board. I hope it's okay that I'm calling. I sat down. This was unexpected. What can I do for you? I wanted to apologize. She paused. For my father. For how he treated you and the other tenants. I didn't know how bad things had gotten until recently. I didn't know what to say, so I stayed quiet. He's my dad, and I love him, but he's also stubborn and proud and terrible at admitting when he's wrong. After he lost the buildings, he spiraled. Blamed everyone else. My mom finally left him last month. She'd had enough of his excuses. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and meant it. The thing is, I found all these emails while helping my mom pack. Emails from you, from other tenants begging him to fix things. Photos of mold, broken heaters, leaking ceilings. And his responses were just awful. I had no idea. Jennifer took a breath. I work in property management in New York. When I saw what he'd been doing, how he'd been treating people, I was horrified. That's not how you run buildings. That's not how you treat human beings. No, it's not, I agreed. I know this doesn't fix anything, and you don't owe me anything, but I wanted you to know that someone in his family sees what he did wrong. And I wanted to say thank you. Thank you for what? For buying that building and actually taking care of it. I drove by last month when I was visiting my mom. It looks amazing. Mrs. Chin, she was my babysitter when I was little, she told me you're a good landlord. That means something. We talked for another 20 minutes. Jennifer told me about her property management work, asked me questions about my business, offered advice on tenant retention strategies. By the end of the call, we'd exchanged emails and she'd invited me to a real estate networking event in New York. After we hung up, I sat there thinking about how complicated people are. Dennis had been a terrible landlord, but he also had a daughter who turned out completely different, who saw his failures and chose another path. The holidays that year were different. I spent Christmas with James and his family. His wife made this incredible roast. His kids asked me a million questions about fixing up old buildings. It felt like family in a way my actual family never quite had. My parents had never really understood what I did. You collect rent from people? My mom had said when I tried to explain. That seems kind of predatory. I'd stopped trying to explain after that. January 2024, James and I bought our biggest project yet, a 12-unit building in Fishtown that had been abandoned for 3 years. It was a massive renovation, but the neighborhood was gentrifying fast, and the numbers worked. I was on site every day, managing contractors, making decisions, learning how to handle bigger projects. One afternoon in February, I was in the basement dealing with a plumbing issue when I heard footsteps upstairs. I came up to find Dennis standing in the empty first-floor unit, looking around. How'd you get in here? I asked. Door was open. He turned to face me. This is quite an operation you've got. What do you want, Dennis? He shrugged, trying to look casual but failing. Heard you're doing well. Multiple buildings now. Good for you. Thanks. You know, I could have done the same thing if the timing had been different. Market crashed right when I bought. Wasn't my fault. There it was. The excuse? Always the excuse. The market crashed for everyone, I said. Some people adapted. You chose not to maintain your properties and blame your tenants instead. His face reddened. I did the best I could with what I had. Your best was telling me to put a bucket under a leaking sink for 3 months. Your best was letting Mrs. Chin freeze through 2 winters. Your best was ignoring black mold that could have made people seriously ill. I was struggling financially. You don't understand the pressure. Then you should have sold. I interrupted. You should have admitted you were in over your head and sold to someone who could actually handle it. Instead, you collected rent from people and gave them nothing in return. Dennis stared at me. You're pretty high and mighty for someone who got lucky at an auction. I got lucky? I laughed. I studied for months. I saved every penny. I documented every single thing you refused to fix. I did my homework. That's not luck, Dennis. That's work. Well, congratulations. You won. You got the building, you got the tenants' respect, you're living your dream. Must feel good standing there judging me. I'm not judging you, I said quietly. I'm just not making excuses for you anymore. And neither should you. Dennis left without another word. I never saw him again. The 12-unit building renovation took 8 months. We finished in September 2024. Every unit was rented within 2 weeks of listing. Market rate, quality tenants, proper leases. James and I celebrated at the same cafe where we'd first met. 2 years ago you were a guy with a space heater and a dream, he said, raising his coffee cup. Now look at you. I looked at the spreadsheet on my laptop. My portfolio was worth over $1 million between solo properties and partnerships. My monthly cash flow was more than I'd made annually at my data analyst job. I had a business I'd built from scratch, tenants who trusted me, a mentor who'd become a true friend. You know what the crazy part is? I said. I should probably send Dennis a thank you card. If he'd been a decent landlord, I'd still be working my corporate job and complaining about rent. James laughed. Some lessons come from the worst teachers. Yeah, I agreed. They really do. The final chapter of this story happened in March 2025, almost 3.5 years after I'd first signed that lease with Dennis. I was at my office, which was really just the renovated first-floor unit of my original building on Columbia Avenue. I'd converted it into workspace instead of renting it out. James thought I was crazy, giving up $1,200 a month in rent, but I liked having a home base. My assistant Tara knocked on the door. You have a visitor. Says it's personal. I looked up from my laptop. Who is it? Mrs. Chen from 2A. Mrs. Chen rarely came to the office. She just texted if something needed fixing, and I handled it immediately. I came out to find her in the waiting area, holding a large envelope. Mrs. Chen, everything okay? Is something wrong with your unit? No, everything perfect. She smiled. I come to give you something. She handed me the envelope. Inside was a greeting card with a photo of her entire family, at least 20 people, spanning 3 generations. Inside the card was a message in her neat handwriting. Dear Marcus, you gave me back my home. For 6 years with Dennis, I lived in cold, in fear, in a place that hurt my health. You made it warm again. You made it safe. My grandchildren visit now, and I am not ashamed. Thank you for caring about an old woman's comfort. You are a good man. Below the message, every family member had signed their name. I'm not ashamed to say I teared up right there in my office. Mrs. Chen, this is incredibly kind. You didn't have to. I wanted to. She interrupted. You're different than Dennis. You care about people, not just money. That is rare. After she left, I sat with that card for a long time. This was why I did it. Not the cash flow or the portfolio value or the business success. It was this. Making someone's home actually feel like a home. That afternoon, I got an email from Jennifer Karpinski. We'd stayed in touch over the past year, occasionally sharing real estate war stories and industry insights. Subject: thought you should know. Marcus. My father passed away last week. Heart attack. He was 59. I'm not writing for condolences. I'm writing because going through his things, I found a folder. It was labeled Columbia Avenue, and it was full of documents about the building you bought. Foreclosure notices, auction information, bank correspondence. At the very bottom was a handwritten note, dated about 6 months ago. It said, "That kid Marcus did what I should have done. Fixed it right. Took care of the tenants. I was angry at first, thought he stole my building. But he didn't steal it. He earned it. I lost it because I stopped caring. Note to self, care about things or lose them. I thought you'd want to know that before he died." He understood. He knew you weren't the villain in his story. He was. Take care, Jennifer. I read that email 3 times. Then I closed my laptop and went for a walk. I walked through Fishtown, past all the buildings I now owned or co-own, past the cafe where James and I had first talked shop, past the apartment where I'd frozen through that first winter, where my ceiling had leaked, where I'd documented everything that would eventually change my life. Dennis had been a terrible landlord, but he'd also, in his own backward way, taught me exactly how not to run a business. He'd shown me what happens when you take people's money and give them nothing in return. He'd demonstrated the difference between owning property and caring for it. And in the end, he'd understood that. I got back to the office and pulled up my tenant database. 43 units across 5 buildings. 43 homes I was responsible for. 43 families or individuals trusting me to do right by them. I sent an email to all my tenants. Subject: Spring Maintenance Check-in. Hi everyone. As we head into spring, I wanted to reach out and make sure everything in your unit is working properly. If you need any repairs, upgrades, or have any concerns, please let me know. I'll be scheduling preventive maintenance visits over the next month, but if anything needs attention before then, don't hesitate to contact me. Also, thank you for being great tenants. This business works because of mutual respect and trust. I don't take that for granted. Best, Marcus Webb. Within an hour, I had responses. Most were just quick thank yous, everything's fine, appreciate you checking in. But a few mentioned small issues, a dripping faucet, a loose doorknob, a window that stuck. I scheduled repairs for all of them within 48 hours. That evening, James and I met for dinner. I told him about Mrs. Chen's card and Jennifer's email about Dennis. Heavy day, he said. Yeah. Makes you think, though. About legacy. What we leave behind. You're 31 years old and you're talking about legacy? I laughed. I mean, not like I'm dying or anything. But Dennis died at 59 with nothing to show for it but failed businesses and broken relationships. Meanwhile, Mrs. Chen's grandkids are making memories in a home I helped make safe. That means something. It does, James agreed. You know what you're doing differently than most investors your age? What's that? You actually give a shit about the people living in your buildings. Most guys getting into this game, they're running numbers, maximizing profits, treating tenants like revenue streams. You're building a business, but you're also building community. Is that profitable long term? He smiled. Let me put it this way. My retention rate is about 70%. Yours is 94%. Lower turnover means lower costs, more stability, better word of mouth. So yeah, caring about people is actually very profitable. But that's not why you do it. No, I admitted. It's not. We finished dinner and I drove home, past my buildings glowing warm in the evening light, windows showing families having dinner, watching TV, living their lives in spaces I'd helped create or restore. My phone buzzed. A text from the couple in 3B, the teachers. Hey Marcus, our lease is up next month. Just wanted to let you know we'd love to renew if possible. This has been the best apartment we've ever lived in. Thanks for being an awesome landlord. I texted back immediately. Would love to have you stay. I'll send the renewal paperwork this week. I thought about that first winter, freezing in that same unit, Dennis telling me to use a space heater, the mold growing in the bathroom corner. I thought about how different things could be when someone actually cared. The story of how I became a landlord starts with the worst landlord I ever had. It ends with me becoming the landlord I wished I'd had. And somewhere in between, I learned that revenge isn't nearly as satisfying as building something good from something broken. Dennis taught me what not to do. Mrs. Chen taught me why it matters. And James taught me how to make it sustainable. 3 years after signing that lease in a building that was slowly falling apart, I own that building and 4 others. I have tenants who trust me, a business that's growing, and a career I accidentally fell into because someone refused to fix my radiator. Life's funny that way. Sometimes the worst experiences teach you exactly what you need to know. And sometimes the people who wrong you end up giving you the greatest gift of all, the motivation to do better. I never sent Dennis that thank you card. But I think in his own way he knew. And that's enough.